Nothing in this podcast is intended as investment advice, and the people in this podcast may hold positions in the stocks they talk about. Do not buy any investment based solely on a tip or recommendation. Please do your own research.
Hello and welcome to the Sunday Roast. It's Sunday the 29th of June. I'm Phil Carroll.
I'm Kevin Hornsby.
And I'm Charles Archer.
And what a week it's been. Feels like we've been on the what I call the big one at Blackpool. I don't know if you've ever been on that big roller coaster of emotions on the market this week. Was it Shakedown Tuesday? I think I heard someone call it.
That was partly because I bumped mad last Saturday. That's why I feel like I've been on a roller coaster.
No. Here's what happened. Kev got on a plane, right? And that's the second he stepped off, that was it. The markets just went red.
Yeah, famous last words. We'll check on this in a bit. And then I was sending Charles a message saying, I think Kev's going to have a bit of a shock when he gets off his plane.
But this is the name of the game, right? If you play about with Bitcoin, anything in cryptocurrency, leveraged crypto treasury companies, there's going to be massive volatility and not everyone's going to win. I'd venture, though, at the lows we're at now, if you like a bit of risk, then it's a good entry point where we are at the moment as we record on Friday.
Absolutely. I mean, there is going to be, obviously, as you say, a lot of volatility on the way, but we're going to talk a lot about treasuries later. So let's have a look at some of the news stories that have dominated the headlines this week. And really, there's only one, and that's how do you solve a problem like Iran? I guess the answer is by ordering the fleet of jets to pound Iran's Fordo and two other nuclear complexes. That's how. Game's not over. Iran still has hidden store of enriched uranium, apparently. So 3 days before Donald Trump ordered the American jets to pound Iran's Fordo nuclear complex with bunker buster bombs, a convoy of 16 lorries was seen on satellite images arriving at one of the tunnels to the facility buried in a mountainside. Analysis of the pictures suggested that some of the trucks had come to dump aggregate in an ultimately forlorn attempt to reinforce what is believed to have been a key base for the Islamic Republic's program of enriching uranium. Other vehicles, however, had arrived unladen and appeared to be tasked with removing material from the site. So just what has been removed has not been disclosed, but according to experts in the uranium regime itself, it's a reasonable assumption that at least some of it is highly enriched uranium. So what do we think is going on there? Do we think that they've got this stockpile of apparently 400 kilograms of uranium, and what are they going to do with it?
Well, I think the key thing to understand is that nobody wants Iran to get nuclear weapons. And it's complicated by the invasion of Iraq back in the early 2000s, where we said that Iraq had the ability to make nuclear weapons. Millions of people marched in London saying we don't want to go to war in Iraq. They went to war in Iraq, and there were no nuclear weapons. But Iran has made it pretty clear that they, in my view anyway, that they want nuclear weapons. But on a geopolitical scale, does Russia or China or Israel want them to have them? No.
Yeah.
And then the other complicating factor is Iran is predominantly a Shia Muslim country. It's surrounded by Sunni Muslims in all the other Muslim countries around, and they don't want them to have a nuclear weapon either. Yeah. So as much as Iran might posture, my suspicion is, and the markets, hitting record highs at the moment, don't seem to be concerned. My suspicion is that everybody's quietly happy that the US is dealing with what could become a problem. Yeah. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah.
I think the similarities with that Saddam, the weapons of mass destruction, which ultimately led Blair to go in with Bush at the time. Remember it very well. But as you say, maybe the parallels are you can't really draw parallels because ultimately Iran has been enriching uranium. They've got proof of that. But I mean, the ultimate thing is Iran is a very different regime. They have, how many, as we talked about with Kev last week, the proxies for the likes of, or the Houthi rebels in
Hamas, Hezbollah,
Hezbollah, all these people, like genuinely, they funded the attacks on Israel on October the 7th. So, ultimately, do you think that they could have lobbed one into one of the neighbours and you potentially used it?
I don't think they're there yet, but I think the problem is if you do anything to do with nuclear weapons, you'll understand that concept of mutually assured destruction, right? And all of the nuclear states, whether regardless of what's going on in the wider world or their interests, none of the nuclear states, in my view anyway, have any interest in firing a nuclear weapon. They don't want to upset the world order. And that's the case whether it's China, the US, Russia, the UK, France, even North Korea. Kim is quite happy to be allowed to control his own borders of his country. But Iran I'm not certain that they wouldn't fire a nuclear weapon because it's run by people who are genuine extremists.
Yes.
And so it is a different strategy. It's a different
Yeah.
kettle of fish.
Absolutely, it's a completely different kettle of fish. If they had the weapon, I think we would be in serious danger of having a third world war pretty damn quick, and it would be nuclear, and that would be disastrous.
Yeah.
That said, I think what's happened is that the US have gone in basically as the big brother of Israel and sorted them out. It's as simple as that. It's not any different than any other nation around the Middle East that they've tried to do things in. But what you have to understand about the Middle East is the Middle East is split across the board as well. You know, the Saudis hate them, Qatar loves them, Kuwait quite likes them, Egypt doesn't particularly like Iran, you know, etc., etc. So Lebanon absolutely despises Iran because of Hezbollah. You know, so it's very, very complicated. Let's put it that way.
It's also worth noting that, you know, a very large number of people in Iran, i.e. the Iranian citizens, also hate their government.
Yes,
you know?
they were actually celebrating
Correct.
the attacks,
Yeah.
which was incredible to see. Some of the interviewed some of the locals, and they were like, half of them were celebrating because it was almost like an uprising and somebody attacking their, as you say, it was their aggressor. But one interesting thing that happened, and I want to just bring this to is that moments after that, there was a ceasefire announced. There were reports of a single missile fired by Iran after the truce being intercepted by Israel, which obviously led to strong words from the Israeli military. And upon hearing this, Trump commented, and I'll quote, paraphrase, we have two countries that have been fighting for so long and so hard that they don't know what the fuck they're doing. What did you make of this little outburst? We've not seen anything since, I think it was it Truman, I think, who was the last president who came out with the F-bomb?
Well, I think people talk about Trump as though he's not calculating, as though he always says just what's on his mind, right? And that's not true. That's like the perception he wants you to have of him.
Yeah.
But that was genuine frustration. Regardless of what you think of him, he thought, right, well, we've negotiated a realistic ceasefire, and then we can, you know, deal with this and it will be fine. And then 10 minutes later? I think it was something ridiculous, you know, literally. And then he just got really, really frustrated and angry. And I think that he's, you know, that also sends a message because he's not. The problem is that Israel is the US's outpost in the Middle East, right? But he's also not happy with the way Israel has conducted itself with Gaza and also with all of its neighbors. And so, you know, it's almost, to me, it's almost like a headmaster at school getting angry with two children who keep fighting each other.
Yeah.
You know, and it's really awful to put it like that because people are
back
dying.
in the day, they'd have brought out a ruler or the pump, as it was called back then, Charles.
I imagine the phone calls that he's making, will, you know, are in not in any uncertain terms. But then the problem is, you think, the US has all the control over Israel. The US also needs Israel to maintain that control in the Middle East. And, you know, when you look at Iran, Russia wants Iran to have power in the Middle East so it can maintain a sense of control there as well. So it's just proxy war after proxy war. But then I think the danger is it's so complex, Middle East politics. You can spend a lifetime studying it and still not know everything that's going on.
Yeah, I mean, the good news is obviously this ceasefire appears to be holding, though it remains fragile, and both Israel and Iran have expressed conditional commitment to the truce, stating that they will respect it as long as the other side does the same. So that's good to see. But let's move on to our guest this week. Probably not surprising, this company operates in the Bitcoin treasury space. It's no other than Hewie Rattray, CEO of the London Bitcoin company, formerly Binance. Welcome to the roast, Hewie.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah. How's life treating you?
Yeah, pretty good. Just, things are ticking along nicely. And, you know, glad to see so much sentiment in the market, even if it's disappeared a bit in recent days. But yeah, I think we're positive on the long-term stuff here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, before we move on to the kind of like the hot topic right now, the Bitcoin treasury aspect of the company, can you just tell us a little bit more about your background, Hewie, please?
Yeah, so ever since I was a student, which was way back in 2013, developed an interest in Bitcoin. And we used to play around with it when I was at university. And then after I graduated, I became a stockbroker in London and did that for a couple of years. And then I got recruited by a small firm who was trying to kind of bridge the intersection between crypto and the public markets. So this was kind of the end of 2015. They were called Smaller Company Capital. And with those, there was just three of us there. And we were kind of trying to figure out what to do, like how we could give capital markets exposure to this space. And the first one we set up was KR1, Kryptonite 1, as it was called back then. And, you know, we seeded them with £250,000 or something. And that obviously scaled into being, a huge company. I think it topped out at about 500 million market cap in 2021. They never really, we did a couple of financings for them, but they mostly just survived on turning over their crypto investments and reinvesting them. And they did really well. They seeded Polkadot and, a bunch of other huge projects. And now off the back of that, we set up an enterprise blockchain company in Canada, which did very well, got to a 9-figure market cap. And then we ended up being seed investors in the Argo blockchain at the end of 2017. And then I kind of worked as a consultant for Argo right the way through to 2022 and, helped Peter with a lot of his capital markets stuff along that journey. In between that, I ran a private venture capital fund outside of Singapore. I lived in Singapore for 3 years. I had an NFT gaming studio, which I sold out, which I exited to someone in that period as well. And just forever been doing crypto stuff, really. And I'm glad to kind of be back in the public markets and doing something that, is on the intersection. Because I think, this is what we've all been waiting for, this huge institutional grade adoption, right? And it's kind of happening before our eyes right now.
Yeah. I mean, talk the listeners through what it is Vinance does. I mean, obviously people are sort of probably aware about the treasury aspect, but I really want to focus on the initial, how I remember the company, this decentralized mining operations across, North America, USA and Canada, and obviously leveraging renewable energy sources to sustainably mine Bitcoin. So just talk us through those operations as well.
Yeah. So when Dave set up Vinance, I came to consult with him for a bit and, kind of help him with understanding Bitcoin and understanding the network and kind of just assisting because I built up a good knowledge from my time with Argo and just, generally from it being a hobby of mine. I think what we learned from Argo is not over leverage yourself, not spend a lot of money building a facility. And then, where Argo really suffered was Texas energy crisis combined with, a huge drawdown in Bitcoin. So, when Dave was kind of mapping out what to do with finance, we agreed, let's just keep it very dynamic, right? Let's not host our own machinery. Let's use hosting providers. Let's be kind of calculated about what machines we're picking up. We don't have to go for the brand spanking new ones. You can go for something which gives a good yield and the impairment's already halfway done. So, it can be profitable if you're going 2 generations old on machines and stuff like that. So, we went out to various sites in the US and we kind of cherry picked a few places where the energy is cheap, the energy is good and renewable, and we can be profitable. And the good thing about our operation is you can just pick these things up and move them elsewhere if you get a situation like the Texas power crisis that happened in 2022. So from there we were always in the kind of accumulation game with Bitcoin and trying to acquire as much as possible, but also trying to build out the mining fleet, which to some extent required us to use some of the Bitcoin we produce. And then I think we realized quickly that we couldn't really scale this properly on Aquis. It would get to a certain point. Bitcoin mining was definitely losing its popularity in the capital markets. And, you still see some essence of that in the US. So we had this prospectus in with the FCA and it was kind of going back and forth for quite a few months. And then suddenly they reached out to us and they said, right, I think we're ready to approve you guys. And we're like, well, this is fantastic news. So yeah, in January, over the Christmas period, we raised some money and we got the IPO over the line and then we were on the main board. And I think, if you read our prospectus, if anyone wants to go and read our prospectus, you'll understand from what we put in there in terms of permissions within the business. We were already kind of developing the embryo of a Bitcoin treasury company. We were very careful to put that we could acquire and, mine and buy Bitcoin in the prospectus because we kind of saw what was going on with Mess Planet and, what had previously gone on with Strategy. And we said, well, perhaps this is where the tailwind's going to be going into 2025. And then, when we got on the dance floor, I hope I'm not saying too much here, but our lawyer was like, look, you got here. This is an incredible feat to already get here. And they were like, don't do anything too drastic, right? Let's just, simmer for a couple of months before you do anything, that's going to kind of, before you do anything too aggressive. And so we were like, okay, we'll just behave well, raise a bit of money, expand the mining fleet a bit and stuff like that. And then it kind of came to the point where we were like, we need to do this kind of mini pivot. We need to let the market know what we want to do and how we think we can scale this in the best way possible. And that's when we raised $4 million of institutional capital out of the States with a convertible. And then we kind of went on and adopted our Bitcoin treasury policy and announced it. And then, things have got, really fast since then. And I think, we've developed a community behind the stock, which we just didn't have last year. And, that's where I think a lot of my skill set is kind of fostering and growing a community. And I think, in the modern day public markets, where we're all on social media and, we're all in constant communication with each other, I think many companies forget that, you really need to have a good group of investors behind your stock, and they become your biggest proponents and they become your most vocal advertising angle, right? Is these guys. That's what we, going back to Argo, that's what we did so well on Argo. We had this huge, great community, and we wouldn't have got anywhere near the market cap that we got to without them.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you recently announced that you purchased an additional 5.85 Bitcoin at an average price of about $107,000,
Yeah.
Which brings your total holdings to 65.03 Bitcoin with an average cost of about $98,000.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how pure play and pure play treasury is Vinance in that sort of space? Because I hear all about this fit score online now. So it sounds like the kids saying "rate my fit," and the MNAV and all the the multiples of NAV, which is a completely new concept. But just talk us through what the values are in those MNAVs and the fit scores. Obviously, usually the higher the MNAV, the more appealing an investment, because you've got more leverage and upside, as opposed to more of a something like strategy, which has got a lower MNAV.
Yeah. So I've been told by our lawyers that I can't say our MNAV at the moment because we didn't announce our cash position. So they said until you announce your cash position, you can't actually publicize your MNAV. I mean, yeah. We'd be at much higher MNAV, without including the cash position. But I think it's only fair to give an accurate number. But so the plan is next week. Basically, off that raise, I think I haven't done the exact maths, but I think we put every single penny in that we raised to Bitcoin, right? We didn't hold anything back, I don't think, but minus the commission and some fees. And that's very much the plan going forward. We want to be able to continue to survive as a company, but we make profit off our mining revenue that covers general expenses for sure. It's actually it's weird how the public markets work, that mining is somehow seen as a bearish underlying business when it is in fact the absolute perfect business for a treasury company. Like who wouldn't want your underlying business to be directly correlated to the Bitcoin network and directly producing Bitcoin, right? It makes perfect sense. So yeah, I think we want to continue the flywheel, as they call it. I'm not a big fan of using the terminology that other big companies have kind of put into place. Someone messaged me on Twitter the other day, and they're like, you need to speak more like the blockchain group guys and Michael Saylor. And I was like, you know what? Like, I've never modeled my life by parroting someone else. And, I only think I can do good work if I, do my own work, right? I'm not going to study how one guy spoke in his interviews and then use all the buzzwords that he used. Like, I think nobody should. It's inspiring for sure, these people who are doing super well. But, for me, I'm an independent person, right? And, I have my own plans, and they don't necessarily include the flywheel and the playbook, in the same way that everyone else uses it.
You
right?
need to bring out your own analogies and things, as you say. It's more creative. But I mean, people need to realize that a lot of these treasuries are they're creating ways of these stuck pools of liquidity, whether it be pension funds or in America, the 401ks, retirement funds in the US, that are not able or have not been able to buy Bitcoin, and a method of getting into that space. And I heard a number that they said that there's over $300 trillion of money that's waiting in these funds, and we've only pulled through about $40 billion thus far. So we really are at the start of this.
Yeah. I mean, there's a huge amount of money, and one of the reasons why I was interested to take this role is specifically because of the London opportunity, and specifically because London, as a finance industry, has the second biggest AUM in the world, right? If you put together all the hedge funds, all the UCITS and investment trusts and stuff, the second biggest AUM to the US, right? Now, our stock market isn't the second biggest market cap, but the money available in London is the second biggest AUM. Now, if you think when a hedge fund in London goes out and raises money, right, they have a mandate that they put out to the people they're trying to raise from. And the mandate says, we're raising $1 billion for a new fund. 50% of that we're earmarking for London Stock Exchange equities. 25%, for some more sex and violence, small caps, whatever, and 25% for private companies, right? So half of that $1 billion is exclusively for London Stock Exchange equities. They have to invest it there. So if they want to use that money and they want to get some access or correlation to Bitcoin or tracking exposure to Bitcoin, there's currently no opportunity for them, right? Like, they can't, unfortunately, do the Aquis stuff. That's just the honest truth. That's not me talking trash about any other company. They just can't, because the various reasons, to do with regulation and whatnot. They can only go on the LSE with this stuff. So, like, what I'm endeavoring to do is kind of build them out a vehicle where they're all comfortable to invest in. And that means doing things pretty sensibly, but also pretty aggressively so we can get to that point. And I think that's the huge opportunity with us. And, the reason we're going to NASDAQ and we're filing our F1 in the next couple of weeks is, basically because I think the Americans, well, they already have from early conversations, they love that story, right? Like, Master Planet's done so well in Japan by bringing in some of the big, Japanese pension money and whatnot. And we want to be the ones that do well in the UK by doing the same thing over here.
So, Hewie, where are you from in the UK?
I actually grew up in Scotland.
Ah, so you're Scot.
Yeah.
Are your parents both Scottish or as well?
Yeah, they're both Scottish. They both still live up there. Oh, my brother and sister live up there too. I'm just the only one that went.
I was going to say, you sound the least Scottish person I've ever met in my entire life.
He's got the name. You've got the name, though. I mean, the name's a little bit Scottish.
I think that's a compliment, right? Because not many people can understand Scottish.
No,
Well-
I'm the same, Hewie. I spent a lot of my childhood up in Scotland. Don't have a Scottish accent. Whereabouts are you? Middle of Kintyre for me.
Wow, that's a lovely place. I'm from Perthshire, which is kind of like central northeast.
Yeah.
I think Charles sounds even less Scottish, actually.
I'm the least
So,
Scottish, but no, I got sent off to boarding school when I was 8
So
down in
do
Reading.
you
and
like-
that's from my accent.
Do you like a wee dram then, Hewie, or not?
You know what? I can't believe I'm going to admit this on a podcast, but I don't like whiskey. I can't stand it.
I'm
That's
logging
not
off.
much
See
of an
you
advert
later.
for Scotland, I tell you.
I don't know. I mean, I like golf, right? That's my big Scottish claim.
You like golf?
Yeah, I play.
What's your handicap?
7 at the moment.
Oh, you're a decent handicap.
I used to be much better, but I just haven't had the time, or just it's difficult in London the past few years.
Yeah.
There was once
Very good.
ambition. There was once ambition for me to go to college in America, and then just didn't get a scholarship.
And play pro golf. Very good. So tell me, what is your thesis on this over the next sort of 3, 6, 12 months? I mean, I read that you want to go on the NASDAQ in terms of, as well as, I presume, the London listing as well. But
Yeah.
how are you going to raise this money? Because ultimately, whether we like it or not, all of these Bitcoin treasury companies have to have access to the cash. If they
Yeah.
don't have access to the cash, it ain't going to work, right? So what differentiates you, effectively you, because you're going to be the one going out and knocking on the doors, I would imagine.
Yeah.
What makes the difference with you that you're going to be able to get the cash in the right way? Because that's the second part, isn't it?
So I think the wider industry is figuring, the wider Bitcoin treasury industry is figuring out pretty quickly that straight equity, just perpetually doing straight equity raises is not the way. Like strategy obviously moved away from that. Master Planet moved away from that too. What I'm most interested in is what the blockchain group are doing in Paris, where if you have an investor that holds a significant Bitcoin position, you can effectively make them a structure that allows they put that Bitcoin in a bond. So you kind of raise Bitcoin directly by issuing bonds denominated in pounds, but funded in Bitcoin. So the investor subscribes by sending you Bitcoin. Company issues him like a 0 coupon bond, and then he has a conversion price. And effectively, when it comes to the end of the bond term, he either decides to convert or he gets to redeem his Bitcoin back. So the hope is that you can scale up your treasury massively. The bondholder becomes hugely in the money on his convert, and he doesn't want his Bitcoin back. He wants to convert because he's in much more profit. So a structure like that, is something that we've been putting together with our lawyers, and also speaking to a couple of big Bitcoin whales who are up for that kind of thing. And it's kind of non-dilutive in the short term. The bond term would go 6, 9, 12 months, whatever, and allows us to stack into our treasury. And by stacking into our treasury, he becomes in the money at some point, and he doesn't want his Bitcoin back. He just wants to convert to stock, right? So that's like a really interesting, it's been really effective with the blockchain group in Paris. And then, we can just do traditional fixed income stuff, right? Like the London bond markets, there was like $1 trillion deployed last year, right? In the past 12 months, and that money is exclusively for London Stock Exchange companies, right? The bond market is just a sidearm of the London Stock Exchange. So we're in a good position there. Even if we were to go and put up a Bitcoin backed bond tomorrow, I don't think we'd have to pay a huge yield, or, I don't think we'd have any lack of interest in the way that, if you over collateralize a product like that, people want to buy it, right? Because the risk is almost eliminated. The risk is just Bitcoin downside, basically. But yeah, just to answer the question, I don't want to raise equity forever. And I think for us to scale, given, we have certain headroom restrictions and stuff like that, which we do have ways around. But I think for us to scale and be able to raise money quickly and deploy it quickly and then raise again, we definitely have to look more on structured product side than on the equity side.
Yeah, but the first phase of this company is probably still to raise a couple more times, you would imagine.
Yeah, of course, yeah. And we can extend the headroom and raise a couple more times after that. I'm not ruling out equity altogether. I'm just saying, when it gets to raising large amounts of money and getting institutional capital, like they require something that's a slightly more conservative investment than putting straight equity in at 20 times MNAV, right? And that's where, fixed income stuff comes in well.
And I mean, where do you see the Bitcoin treasury companies impacting the BTC price over the next, let's say, couple of years? Because, you're now talking about corporate uptake, you're talking about a lot of money starting to circle around and go into Bitcoin, whether it be via your bonds or directly buying the BTC. How do you see that sort of panning out?
So it's only a bullish thing, right? Like I think I read somewhere, and I haven't actually done the maths to back this up, but if every treasury company that's announced hits their targets by the middle of 2026, they should own something like 8% of the entire Bitcoin supply between just the existing treasury companies today. So 8% of the supply of something that is factually finite is like a huge, huge deal, right? It's the equivalent of someone owning, I don't know, 16% of the gold supply in the world, right? One group of companies. Like that's a kind of crazy figure. And these guys, you hope that these people are serious with their strategies and like they promise they're never going to sell their Bitcoin. So you can immediately reduce the amount of Bitcoin in circulation therein. You can take Satoshi's Bitcoin off, you can take the treasury company's Bitcoin off, you can take probably the nation state's Bitcoin off, and then then you've reduced Bitcoin in circulation by 25%. And then that's only going to cause a bottleneck, right? And things are going to compound and things are going to get more aggressive. Like I really am positively hopeful on a Bitcoin price of like 250K this time next year, right? I just don't see
that was a positive, maybe sort of, Hewie, but you can be definitive.
No,
you can be definitive.
I don't want to mislead everyone and say like I know for sure this is going to happen because obviously it's known, but I think that's where it goes. Like I run my own models, right, and I have done for the past few years, and I just don't see. I mean, I think 200K, is really not that optimistic. Like I think you got to be looking for 250K, right? I watched this great interview with Philippe Lafont, who's this really good hedge fund manager that I've admired for a long time, and he puts it quite eloquently. He's like, the market capitalization of the world is like 450 trillion, something like that, right? Gold above and underground is like 20 trillion. Bitcoin is 2 trillion, which is like 0.5% of the world's market capitalization. He says, just with the current sentiment behind it, and because it's this great emerging technology, there's no way that 0.5% doesn't change to like 2.5% across the next 18 months or something like that. So just by that metric, you're looking at like a 4 times uplift, right? Just in the price. And he's looking at that, not like, I think profound is the wrong word, but he's looking at it on a much larger scale. He's saying how much of the world's money can Bitcoin capture? And, he sees 2% as a realistic amount. And, in the near to medium term. So, we've got to look at that as guidance. Like this guy's an extremely good investor. He's made a ton of money over his career. And he's actually not in Bitcoin personally, but he says he wakes up every day and wonders why he hasn't bought Bitcoin yet.
The interesting thing in terms of what you're saying is that when we talk about Bitcoin, if we speak to some of the people, and we spoke to some last Sunday, they were, in my view, at the extreme end. They thought Bitcoin was going to take over the whole of the bond markets, which I can't see myself, to be honest. But I don't know what's your thoughts on that, because that wouldn't be 2%. That would be 25%.
Yeah, I mean, maybe like 10 years ago, I didn't see Bitcoin at a $2 trillion market cap, with all these big institutions and all these big ETFs and stuff. Like I thought it would do really well, but I thought actually I did think the financial industry would stay clear of it because of the messaging behind it, right? It's kind of some irony that this anti-state, anti-bank, anti-fiat commodity somehow now like on the very top of everyone's list, and everyone's like, oh, we got to get the wealth managers and the pension funds and the hedge funds. We got to get them all buying because when I used to run a meetup in London back in 2016, it was called the City of London Blockchain Investors Meetup, and it was very like anarchic. It was very like everyone was like, oh,
Yeah,
fuck this. I remember I had to, because I was working at the time in the city, I had to like take my suit off before the meetup and put like a t-shirt on and then host the meetup.
Good t-shirt, yeah. Get into your skater boy gear.
Like, fuck the banks, fuck the brokers. And then I'd have to go to work the next morning and be like, oh, this is me now.
yeah. Anarchy in the world, basically.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it is a rage against the system, isn't it? I mean, the Bitcoin crypto, in effect, is saying fiat currency is worthless. So, and the problem with the fiat currencies is that they can print at their leisure as much as they want.
Yeah.
Whereas cryptos, not all, but certainly Bitcoin, is limited supply, and the only thing that then needs to be affected is the demand. If the demand goes up, then the price has to follow. That is pure and simple economics and will not change. I can't see how that's going to change.
Yeah,
If we get to the point where more and more and more people want to have Bitcoin as an asset class, then it's not going to go any other way. In the same way as gold, but gold still has the opportunity to produce more, whereas Bitcoin doesn't in that case. So, which one is which? I mean, I was joking last week, but I seriously think that some sort of gold-backed Bitcoin could be phenomenal. It could be like almost like the best of both worlds. But anyway, I mean, what do you think? The existential risk to this, in my view, and that's not your company. This is just the whole thing. Is that the governments just say can't let this happen?
Yeah. I mean, with the current US administration, they're taking the complete opposite way to that, right? The opposite opinion of that. But, I guess that's because they might be long as individuals. But yeah, I mean, maybe there's some wider forces at work, deep state people who probably are deeply concerned about this. And yeah, I mean, yeah, that is the existential risk. And that's probably the only remaining risk left in the Bitcoin market. Like, I remember back in the days when China would ban Bitcoin every year and the price would go back like 30% when they announced a ban. And then they ban it again the next year. And we're like, how can you ban the already banned thing? But it would still have this like knock-on effect on the price. And then there was all this Tether FUD in the past. And it was like Tether wouldn't get an audit, but they're pumping the Bitcoin price. Like, when's it all gonna unravel? Now Tether are apparently, the third most profitable company in the world per employee or something like that, right? It's nuts.
Yeah.
I read a post on Twitter today. It's saying it's funny that the biggest innovation that's come out of the crypto industry is the US dollar on the blockchain. And it's like, that is somewhat ironic again. But yeah, back to the existential risk. Like, I think most countries in the world are meant to behave in the interest of their citizens, right? And, that's all we can hope for in the democratic world. So, when you look at democracies and they have 4 8-year terms, the administrations have to do what they've got to do, right? And there's already too much tailwind behind Bitcoin for people to make aggressive, for the US to do a complete U-turn now and, ban it as an asset or a commodity. Like, and the US is obviously, the greatest power in the democratic world, if not the whole world. And, they're behind it. And it would, even if the Democrats get in the next term, it's going to be difficult for them to unwind what the Trump administration's done, right? By that point.
But it seems like we could go down this rabbit hole for hours and hours.
Yeah, right. I mean,
but it almost feels like, obviously, you almost certainly followed the SEC versus Ripple, right?
Yeah.
And now we've got a new, the SEC is a completely different animal. It's almost become politicized, like the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
And you're saying they can't wind it back. I mean, you get a different administration in 5 years from now.
Yeah.
That has different priorities. Maybe they will. I mean, my personal perspective is that Trump and the people around him, they almost certainly are building up their personal wealth using cryptocurrency. Whether that's good for the wider society and the financial ecosystem, is up to you. But I mean, basically, there's this meme going around, right? Yeah. And Bitcoin always used to be, keep your own Bitcoin in cold storage. It's yours. The whole purpose of it is that you control the money. And this meme going around here, you can use Bitcoin to buy a house if you store it on Coinbase. Mm-hmm. And this is where like I start to see it maybe not unravel, but like where it's getting like super interesting for me, because I have Bitcoin in cold storage next to a few ounces of gold coins, right? Not at my house for anyone thinking about it. I do have it, yeah. And we have this sort of like this idea, that if you keep it in an exchange or in a company, then it's just as safe. But then we saw Celsius collapse. We saw FTX collapse. Obviously, that went. I think FTX lost $32 billion in value in the space of a day.
Yeah.
So we have this situation where, people are no longer viewing Bitcoin as something they keep for themselves, but they, invest in it at arm's length, whether for a crypto treasury company or, on an exchange.
Yeah.
And I guess the question is there a tension there that Bitcoin is no longer fulfilling its original purpose?
Yeah, and that's like I think that's a really topical question. And FTX was a huge blow, obviously, for everyone in the industry. I mean, it was like I lost money on FTX with my fund personally, and like I'm not going to say in hindsight they were dodgy, but they were quite clearly very aggressive, and it was run by people in their late 20s and early 30s. And I think it's difficult to say, well, FTX lost that money, so maybe Fidelity, the 5 trillion asset manager that we custody with, are going to blow up and lose your money, right?
Yeah.
Know that there is just intrinsic risk in any financial institution, as the banking industry has proved, every 10 years that they all fuck up at some point. But you have to look at your counterparties as individual entities and not just put them all in together and say, oh, that happened to these guys, so it should happen to these guys. Like, we have a very sensible operation with Fidelity. It's an omnibus account, but so obviously client assets are kept separate from the firm's assets and stuff like that. And I'm self-custody as well for my personal holdings. But I'm just, if people are thinking I'm too risky, running our big Bitcoin stack with Fidelity, then they really need to look at themselves. Like, I understand the message behind not your keys, not your coins, but we're a public company. We need to pass an audit, and we need to have institutional grade custody. The industry doesn't need institutional grade custody, and just because you're using someone like Fidelity to custody doesn't mean you're diverging away from the messaging behind Bitcoin. I think you're just opting for an alternative way to store it. Not everybody wants to walk around, with money on their phone or with some piece of paper with their private key on it, right? And that's just, people just aren't equipped to deal with that kind of stuff. Like, some people just need looked after, or some companies require certain systems in place.
A lot of people just want to click a button and say, I invested in Bitcoin. Done.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people, and I'd include myself in this almost, but if I were not in finance, it's probably what I would do. I would say, well, I want 5% of my wealth in Bitcoin because I'm not sure it will go to the moon, but I also don't want to be out of the party if it does, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Same as gold. I think it's following that same sort of thing. But I guess for me, it's this the bigger question really, and this is going to crop up for any crypto treasury company in the UK. When the SEC versus Ripple was going on, obviously the central question is cryptocurrency XRP a security? Is Bitcoin a security? Because it's clearly not a commodity. Is it a security? We don't, the answer now is no. So there's this kind of gray area where it's sort of semi-regulated, but no one agency, whether it's in the US, EU, or UK, really has any control over it. But if you regulate it, then you're taking away that central purpose.
Yeah.
So I guess my question to you is, how should cryptocurrency be regulated? And you as a crypto treasury stock, I guess you're under the purview of the FCA, but again, it's grey area. And I imagine your nomads, I suppose you don't have a nomad on the main market, but your lawyers will be dealing with these questions as well.
Yeah. And, I have to, sort of separate my personal opinion from, what's the smart opinion for the asset class in the future. Like, when I was younger, I was very anti-regulation. I believed that people should be educated to be able to look after themselves, right?
Yeah.
We shouldn't have the fallback of a regulator that will refund us money if we lose it with the bank or whatever. Like, I've been scammed lots over the in many times in the past, and I'm one of those guys who just takes it on the chin and blames it on myself, right? It was my lapse of judgment that allowed me to get into a relationship with that institution or that broker or that cryptocurrency or whatever, and on my head be it if I got fooled by them. But I guess not everyone has the education to be able to make good decisions.
Well, I think it's not even education. I think because we're all in finance and we all understand crypto, probably to a much higher level, and you probably to a much higher level, and I than many other people. It's almost the same as like if my washing machine breaks and I need a plumber, I don't know how to fix it. I have to call a plumber.
Yeah.
You think you think everyone has the same level of knowledge, and they don't at all. So they need, when you say you need a handheld, I think we just live in a very specialized world.
Yeah.
Like, you need to make things easy for the vast majority of people who go, what's Bitcoin? I don't know, it's this online currency, and that's the only thing they know, and I want to buy some.
Yeah.
Click.
I think It's just impossible to regulate because it is stateless, right? Like countries can regulate it, but then everyone can switch on VPNs, and there's just many ways around it.
It's impossible.
As technology evolves, like the only way that something could realistically happen is if somehow the wider cryptocurrency industry, set up some kind of committee that was, decentralized and, was somehow like a direct democracy that went back to holders of certain coins that,
it's classic Google guards for guards stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just, it would have to happen that way, right? It would have to be almost
democratic.
Yeah, almost like Switzerland, like, I don't know.
And then my last thought just on Bitcoin in particular, because it's fun picking your brain, because people ask me these questions all the time, right? And basically there's two kind of, in my opinion anyway, there's two kind of main, I wouldn't say issues, but things that you might want to think for the future. So the first is quantum computing and whether it breaks through and basically makes it impossible to safeguard your Bitcoin. That's the first part.
Yeah.
And the second part, in terms of sort of increased adoption as a currency, not as an asset, but as a store of value, but as a currency, for transaction speed, the high fees during peak times. I know the Lightning Network is improving things, but is Bitcoin actually something that can become a currency, a usable currency, for like in terms of compared to like Visa, for example? Yeah. So there's kind of two parts, existential.
Yeah, the quantum stuff, like I just think it's like when quantum computing comes, like there's probably going to be sentient AI, and there's probably going to be some technological Armageddon anyway, and not just Bitcoins. If quantum computing comes, basically combined with AI, the stock market's completely fucked too, right? Like it doesn't just apply to Bitcoin. There's going to be a whole financial catastrophe when all this happens, unless the people behind Bitcoin, the core developers behind Bitcoin, and the people who build the financial infrastructure, in the world, are suitably protecting themselves from the development of that. Like that's the thing. Like this doesn't just apply to Bitcoin. That argument, it applies to the US dollar. It applies to the banking system.
Well, we interviewed Jonathan Bixby at Tiger Royalties last week, and they've invested, among other things, they've invested into a company which has an algorithm which is basically trading meme coins for profit, right?
Yeah.
And obviously agentic AI advancing. We're getting to a point now where the stock market, algorithms obviously control the stocks for a very long time already.
Yeah.
But as artificial intelligence gets smarter and smarter, it's becoming who's got the cleverest AI.
Yeah.
Right. And that's going to be the case for crypto or for stocks. Will it be the case for Bitcoin in the future?
The sad thing for us humans is it's probably going to be an AI that has the cleverest AI, and no human's going to own the cleverest AI, right?
Yeah.
So yeah,
it's kind of, we're going down the rabbit hole.
I really love AI, like almost as much as I love crypto and Bitcoin. And I'm just fascinated by it.
Yeah. Well, I'm fascinated by it. Like some of my larger clients, so we work under the intersection of artificial intelligence and cryptocurrency. And the stuff that is being developed now makes the stuff that was made 12 or even 6 months ago look like child's play. I guess my main thing for me when we're talking about like going back to like London Bitcoin Company, maybe not the crisis, but there's two kind of key risks, I would say, not just for you guys, but for other players in the space. And the first is we've got the FTA, and back in 2021 they banned crypto ETFs and ETNs for retail investors, and now they're talking about lifting that ban.
Yeah.
And also allowing the US ETFs to be bought within ISAs and SIPs. And whether, does that become, a competitive for you, or does that improve your visibility? And then the other problem is with Bitcoin in particular. Yes, it's been the best performing asset for at least a decade. And in that time, though, the volatility has been crazy compared to any other asset class. We were 80 grand a couple of months ago, 50 grand a year ago, maybe, in terms of US dollars. So how do you manage that volatility in Bitcoin? Is it just we will never sell it and just, I don't know.
Yeah.
And I guess when Bitcoin is low, that's when you find it harder to raise capital because the sentiment is low as well. So managing all those things, I feel like I should separate those questions, but I struggle to.
The volatility thing, I think that point is like slowly disappearing, or is slowly getting more sensible. Like during the tariff war, Bitcoin was no more reactive than the NASDAQ, right? As an index, it was relatively stable, the corrections and the pumps off the back of trade agreements and stuff like that. I think just, the only thing that we can base this on is the market that it actually happened, right? Last year on with MicroStrategy and the ETFs approved then, right? And it was an incredibly good thing for MicroStrategy at the end of the day, because it basically it propelled Bitcoin up to new highs for sure. And then also it put Bitcoin on the map and legitimized it as a serious investment for a whole host of institutions and just general investors. So there are different plays, like a treasury company and an ETF, and they're very different in some obvious ways. ETFs are static by nature, right? They go up and down with the asset. Like they want minimal tracking error. They just want to float along with the price of the asset, via redemptions and inflows. Treasury company is effectively more leveraged exposure, and there is some kind of like management risk and to them, but a treasury company is a much different offering. And the aim with a treasury company is certainly to outperform the underlying asset by kind of leveraging yourself up in various ways, and that's Bitcoin, using your stack to raise more money to then buy more Bitcoin. And the MNAV calcs and the months to cover calcs and stuff like that, they all kind of validate that, as them being a different investment. Like, I think the financial markets are big enough over here, as they are in the States, to accommodate both. And we thought, maybe we should put an ETF application in one day, or would that be counterintuitive to like what we're trying to do with Finance, the London Bitcoin company? I like the idea as an investor of being a strategy holder, not a 21 shares or a Vanguard ETF, Bitcoin ETF holder. Like, I like the way that Saylor, operates it. And I do think he has consistently outperformed Bitcoin, and he will consistently outperform Bitcoin, in years to come. And yeah, there's some times when he lags behind a bit, but ultimately, if you look at it over a long enough time frame, he always catches the ground that he's lost up and then outperforms after that. So yeah, I think treasury companies are a better bet for me, and I would welcome ETFs and ETNs in London. I think that would just be a great thing for us.
Fantastic. I'm out of questions now.
Hewie, I've got the last question, and I think we'll wrap it up. What competitive advantage do you see in the fact that you are probably the only main board listed company that is currently a treasury Bitcoin player?
Yeah, so the most obvious one would be access to structured products and innovative funding means, and then also just institutional adoption, and that's like regulated funds, like I said at the start of this call, right? Very specific money that can only invest on the London Stock Exchange. And I just think there's very robust regulations around us in comparison to the other markets in London. And I just think it's in summary, it is where the treasury company is meant to be in London. The big treasury company in London, whoever it may end up being, it should be on the London Stock Exchange, and it should be on the main board. Like this, it wouldn't make sense for it to be anywhere else if it's going to get to a $10 billion, $20 billion market cap, right? Or pound market cap, and hold many hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin. Like, this is where it needs to be.
What time frame do you anticipate that one of the winners, obviously you're hoping it's going to be you, will get to that 10, 15, 20 billion valuation in the UK?
I'd say it probably won't happen within 12 months, almost for sure. I think the clear winner will appear, I think, not for a couple of years. I think there's much of the race to go yet, if you want to call it a race. But there doesn't need to be one individual winner. Like, having said that, right? Like, there could be a dozen companies with 9-figure plus market caps, or even 10-figure market caps in the UK with a Bitcoin treasury policy. I think there will be many, many more companies who have a Bitcoin treasury policy over the next 2 years. But if there's going to be someone who's going to stand out and really kind of carry the industry forward in the UK, I don't think that person, that company, has been determined yet at all. And I think we see with the volatility right now in the market, right? It's not hard, with a few more weeks like this, that someone else might potentially take top spot, right? Things can change very differently. Things can be managed badly. Things can be managed really well. And yeah, the race is on, in my opinion. I'm really competitive. So like I said on Telegram.
Yeah, that's good.
I said on our Telegram chat the other day, like, as well as I'm a big supporter of SWC, I want to flip them. Like, of course I want to flip them. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't have big goals to be the number one treasury company, right? I'm not doing this just to come second or third in a year's time. Like, I look at that market cap daily and I say, well, we've got to beat that, and we've got to beat that by quite some way, and we've got to be the top ones. And I think the foundation we have in place allows us, it gives us a much better sight on the path to get there. But I'm saying
But I also think you're right. I think there's going to be, I think there's going to be multiple winners, and I also think there's going to be two models. I don't know whether you agree with me or not, but
Yeah.
I think the combination of a Bitcoin treasury and an AI underlying business, as well as just pure Bitcoin play, are going to be the two plays that work here out in the UK. You've got what Jonathan Bixby's doing there at TIR. You've got PR1, which are basically AI plays, but they've gone for Bitcoin as well. Yeah. And I think that's sort of a halfway house, if you like. It's a safer play in terms of what people were looking at, as well as the full-on Bitcoin. But I think you've got a massive advantage being on the main market, to be honest. I think you really do. And I think if you make the most of that, then I think you can have a very good shot.
Another interesting thing that's happening in crypto, because I'm very deeply just ingrained in the crypto industry, and most of my friends in real life are from the crypto industry. And, I know a lot of people in the Bay Area and Silicon Valley, and what they tell me, because of this Bitcoin dominance, basically all the crypto engineering talent is now just running like a herd towards Bitcoin. And they're now all building, within the Bitcoin infrastructure, right? Like it started early last year with the year before with like ordinals and runes and stuff like that. But now it's like all the innovation is being sucked away from the rest of the crypto industry and back into Bitcoin. So if you think about, Bitcoin actually had a hard time because it started up, and then, just within a few years, all these other cryptocurrencies started up, and they looked like they were much more appropriate for innovation, like Ethereum, with the dApps and stuff like that, and then all the further new blockchains which had faster speeds and better UI and stuff like that. But now it's like everyone goes where the money is, and the money's in Bitcoin. So now everyone's trying to build and develop Bitcoin infrastructure. And this is coming straight out of Silicon Valley, this information, and I think it will become much more apparent in the next 6 to 12 months when we see, more ordinal runes type things come about in Bitcoin, and people taking advantage of the Lightning Network, and just there being better infrastructure like wallets and stuff like that. So I think this is going to be a really good thing for Bitcoin in the long term, and I'm glad that it's got some of the mind share back that it lost to the rest of the crypto industry.
So Hewie, what's your thoughts on Tau, which is basically the copy of Bitcoin for the developers?
Yeah, no, I like it, right? I'm a techno optimist. Like I'm not, and people always tell me not to say this, but I'm not a Bitcoin maxi. I'm not a maxi anything, right? I have a very open mind about everything. And if someone's going to build cool tech outside of Bitcoin, I'm not going to invest in it with the London Bitcoin company, but I'm not going to say it's a shit coin, right? Just because it's not Bitcoin. Like, I think that's a very narrow-minded approach to life. Like, I like all kinds of innovation and all kinds of development, and I wouldn't tar everything with one brush just because it's not the thing that I'm doing with the London Bitcoin company. And I think we should drive the industry to be more like that, right? It's not, I know Michael Saylor said, there is no second best, it's Bitcoin and nothing else. And I feel like, Michael Saylor is not really, I think, he's an incredible entrepreneur and stuff, but he's very focused on, one thing, and that's Bitcoin.
Very, very single-minded, isn't he? Absolutely. So I'm expecting a bit of a Scottish-themed twist on this answer now, Hewie. So get ready for this one. So this is the roast. What is the ultimate roast dinner in the Hewie or the Rattray household?
So we have like a kind of we have a lot of deer stalking around where we are. So we always have roast venison, roast potatoes, parsnips, broccoli, carrots. Yeah, we're suckers for venison up there, and it's usually 3 days. 3 days. It's been shot 3 days before, so we straight from farm to table, I guess, as they say.
Very good. What sauce, what condiments do you have with that? I mean, is it just the usual gravy? But is there anything that goes particularly well with venison?
Cranberry sauce, definitely. Or, my dad likes to cook bread sauce. My dad's got this weird obsession with cooking bread sauce.
Yeah, bread sauce is good, man. It's
good.
I
mean, I'm not a massive, I like ketchup with my roast, which everyone always hates me for.
Ketchup with venison. You're not one of those ketchup and steak guys.
Yeah, I'm ketchup and everything guy. I love it.
You need to go down to Mackie D's and get your McDonald's chicken McNuggets. No, that would be the thing.
I love McDonald's.
Anyway, for sure, everybody does, even though we don't want to know what's in them.
Okay, well, it's been great to hear your insights, Hewie, and we'll, obviously we thank you for coming on. We'll say Hewie Rattray, CEO of the London Bitcoin company, formerly Binance. Thanks very much for appearing on the roast.
Thank you, everyone, for having me. That was great.
Let's move on to our second guest this week. We're joined by James Sheehan, CEO of Pri0r1ty Intelligence Group. So the company's just unveiled Pri0r1ty, an AI-powered solution designed to help over 5 million UK SMEs integrate Bitcoin payments and manage crypto treasuries. Built on Coinbase Commerce, Pri0r1ty offers non-custodial, multi-signature wallets, AI tools for market insights and reporting, and subscription tiers with enhanced features for listed companies. It integrates with Pri0r1ty's advisor agent, enabling real-time conversion, fiat calculations, and seamless crypto transactions. The company expects to formally launch the product next week and is already in talks with potential adopters.
So welcome, James. How's things going? We saw the RNS come on Friday. For me, looking at it, it looked spectacular, to be honest with you, in terms of the fact that now you're opening up Bitcoin treasuries for thousands and thousands and thousands of companies, where you'll be able to take a small part. Maybe it will be small in the beginning, but I can see as Bitcoin moves on, this could be a phenomenal business for you.
Exactly. Thanks a lot, Kevin, Phil, for having me on again. It is a step in the direction of generating revenue stream from this whole digital asset space. And it's something that we have continually said to the market. We believe in, obviously, the digital asset environment, and we believe that it will grow. And it's quite clear to us, whether it's the emergence publicly of Bitcoin treasury businesses, whether it's the emergence of mining companies now, transacting with digital assets or turning their product into digital assets. There is a growing opportunity for businesses and SMEs in that digital currency space, and somebody has to be there to support them on that journey. And we're very well placed, utilizing our AI platform and our relationship now with Coinbase Commerce to do that. I likened it recently in a conversation I was having with somebody to the picks and shovels of the gold rush. Everybody's running for the hills searching for gold, but the people that really made the money in the end were those selling the picks and shovels at the bottom of the mountain. So if you think about it like that, that's how we're positioning ourselves, alongside obviously having our own Bitcoin treasury as well.
Okay, so everybody's asking me the question. I mean, I think it's a masterstroke personally, but everybody's asking me the question. One, have you already got some Bitcoin?
Yes, we do.
And two, are you going to buy some Bitcoin in the not too distant future?
Yes, we will.
Okay, all good. Right, the third point we're going, because this is going to be short and sweet. I am absolutely livid at the RNS from Pri0r1ty. I cannot believe that they've had the audacity to sell out their stock when they were tied in under AIM Rule 7 until the end of the year. It wasn't even the 1st of July that they were tied into. It was the 12 months they've had. We're going to be writing to the FCA. We're going to be writing to the Nomads. We're going to be writing to AIM itself. I mean, how can you just totally disregard the rules of the exchange that you're on? It's absolutely unbelievable. And they were almost proud of it, saying we made 900 and whatever £1,000 from it. I know you can't comment because there's legal situation going on there, but give us your thoughts.
You're right. I can't comment. Obviously, it was a shock. I'll say that. It was a shock, right? It's not something that, look, we are not in a position at this point in time to be able to comment and say the things that obviously we would like to say, because we've got an internal investigation ongoing and we're obviously taking legal advice and regulatory advice on the situation. I have had numerous messages, direct messages, emails, even telephone calls from apoplectic shareholders who have very strong view on this situation and are demanding that we actually do something about it. So what I will say, because I can't individually comment to people, I can't go back to people and get into conversations about this subject. Clearly, what I will say is we are taking it very seriously. We are taking it incredibly seriously. The board are fully aware. We're in discussions, as I say, with legal and regulatory advisors, and more will come out in due course.
Okay, good. Now, from conversations ongoing, I presume there is a lot of activity going on with Halfspace, with what's going on with PR1, and obviously now what you announced on Friday. So can you give us a bit of a taste of what you expect to happen over the next few weeks?
So first off, we've got the general meeting on Monday. So we've got our GM Monday where we will be hopefully ratifying the transaction with Half-Space and the acquisition. We expect that to obviously pass, but we'll know on Monday when all the votes are in. Once that completes, should it complete, I believe we will be in a very strong position with the acquisition as a combined entity to start to drive additional revenue stream across both businesses. I've said that numerous occasions. Obviously, I can't lead it with any kind of insight because we're not forecasting things at this stage, but there's a real excitement amongst both sets of employees and both teams, Half-Space and Priority AI, because they're already winning potential business, cross-sold potential business. They're already in some big contract discussions with some really well-known blue chip brands and some really well-known blue chip rights holders. So it is very exciting. We've got a number of really cool business focuses now. We've got a really exciting sector to focus on in sport, where they are ripe for the artificial intelligence, the AI technology and data solutions that we provide as a collective group. They're looking for them. We get in lots and lots of inbound. It's not like we are out there hard selling to people. We are getting inbound demand. So, we can run as fast as we can. And then obviously we're growing the digital asset space as well. The RNS on Friday, I'm really pleased about because, as I mentioned earlier, it demonstrates that we are thinking about how you drive revenue and how you actually drive growth in the business. It's not just about saying, we're hoping to do these things or we're going to push into this space because it's a fad. We are actively looking at ways we can drive revenue for the long-term growth of Priority Intelligence Group.
Yeah, and in some ways that's also frustrating because what Primus has done is probably reduce your share price, and this is me saying that, but reduce your share price probably in half. You could have then raised and bought some Bitcoin and had money in the treasury as well in terms of cash to move the business forward. So I'm extremely upset, as I'm sure you can hear. And I'm not asking for an answer from that, by the way, so you don't even need to respond. But I think there's two types of things going on with this BTC Treasury thing. The first one is your pure play BT Treasury, raise, buy, raise, buy, raise, buy, raise, buy, raise, buy. And then you've got to start getting clever about how you do things. Or the second one, which I see as yourself, Tiger Royalties, maybe SBAR as well, they're all saying we have a good intellectual AI business, in your case, data business as well. And then you're going to buy Bitcoin to secure the thing as well. So which one do you want? Do you want the pure play, or do you want something that has an inherent business around it that also will have a very strong proponent of the Bitcoin? Now, as it stands at the minute, you've been given £0 for the Bitcoin. Zero. You are a market cap of about £10 million or less. And basically that's the AI business and Half-Space on its own, at the very least. So I think people should be looking at this and saying, this hasn't even participated as yet, partly because of the shenanigans that have been going on. But anyway, that's my piece. I'll let you finish, James, and then we'll take it from there.
I think we've seen this week. So we've had a very exciting run across the Bitcoin Treasury plays, the pure play Bitcoin Treasury plays for the last 2 months, starting with SWC, obviously, and then migrating across to Coin, Cilium, and Vaults Capital, and some of the others. But the week we've had, obviously, this week with a real shake of the tree, maybe market makers getting flat in certain areas, and investors who've made significant returns taking some of that profit off the table. It does demonstrate the volatility within the sector, and I think people are going to really, pure play equity investors are going to struggle maybe with some of that volatility. That's very much a staple of that digital asset space anyway. So if you're a crypto native, you probably aren't so shocked about the swings in pricing. Whereas if you're more an investor in the capital markets and the equity markets, it may be a bit more of a shock. But if you're looking at these things as long-term pure play asset plays and growth in asset plays, then you're going to have the peaks and troughs, and you just need to buy and hold and look for the long term. I am obviously aware that there's those two structures, as you mentioned. We're very much focused on trying to build a business building a business and making sure we can also take advantage of what is quite clearly here to stay asset class in digital assets. We've seen since 2008 the emergence and the rise of Bitcoin. It doesn't go up in a straight line, but it does go up. We're now at over $100,000 a Bitcoin. The sector is not even really firing on all cylinders yet. So there's expectation certainly from us and across the landscape that it will be significantly higher later on in the year. And I think that will be a catalyst for the market to see some real buoyancy in some of the pure play treasuries and also some of the other companies, as you've mentioned, that are actively involved in the space, but are also running additional businesses, whether it's AI data services or other technology focused businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, that was a good short wrap up. Hopefully we'll be speaking to you next week as some RNS actions happen, and look forward to it, James, and have a good weekend.
Have a great weekend, guys. Look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Let's move on to the market movers and shakers of the week. The best mover of the week that I get on ShareScope was Tungsten West, ticker TUN, up some 70%. And again, no significant news this week, but I guess just based on the back of the fact that the Hemerdon project was designated the strategic project under EU Critical Raw Materials Act, which we saw as well alongside the Green Rock as well, and Kango Resources, I believe the other company that were kind of in the markets. But ultimately, I think we've said, haven't we, Charles and Kev, that this has needed to do some re-rating from I think it was down to like 2-3 pence at one point, or even lower.
Yeah, well, I think anything in the tungsten space is now going up and up and up. Obviously, we've covered Guardian for a very long time, but Tungsten West, I mean, I'm in Exeter. It's a very, very short drive away from me, and it's a very high grade. I think it's the second largest tungsten deposit in the world. It's got tin there as well. It's a fantastic asset, and there's two real problems. First is it's right next door to the city of Plymouth. So they're having to develop mining techniques that are not going to be particularly noisy, which is expensive and time consuming. But the other thing is it's in, Devon and Cornwall, you can't walk 5 minutes without falling down a mine shaft. So that's the other side of it. But we spoke to these guys again back in Mines and Money last year, Q4. And yeah, I mean, this is a fantastic asset. It's a great asset for UK, bringing loads of jobs, and pricing of it in terms of like the margins you can make with the tin and tungsten pricing is crazy. So having been designated a strategic project by the European Union, you're now looking at, okay, so how are we going to get this thing financed up and running and like delivering metal while also keeping the people of Plymouth happy? And I guess that's a question that we'd love to ask Tungsten West directors if they'd like to come on the show.
Yes, please come on. We said it last week, I think, or the week before, and come on and have a chat. I mean, I was speaking with Oliver during the week as well, or messaging him anyway. So I think there's a lot happening there. I think there's going to be news in the not too distant future in, I think, many different forms. So yeah, I think it's going to be a news-rich period, especially the next 2 or 3 months, just on all sorts of stuff, whether it be Pilot Mountain, Tempayut, the government stuff, because yeah, it's going to be reshored for sure. So one way or the other, things are going to happen. So yeah, I think we're going to have an action-packed summer in terms of tungsten, aren't we?
Good.
Indeed.
And then we've got Wishbone Gold, WSBN up some 60% on news about the Dome, red-setted Dome project. Shakers of the week, Anemoi, AMOI, down 55%, although they did announce a Bitcoin strategy, I think, where they were going to talking about putting in 30% of their capital into the Bitcoin strategy. We had RNSs from PR1, Pri0r1ty Intelligence, adopting the Bitcoin strategy. That was last week. And then later this week, Pri0r1ty applied to cross-trade the shares on the US OTC QB market to broaden investor access and enhance liquidity, with approval expected within 30 working days. They also had news early on Friday morning, the Pri0r1ty Intelligence, that they'd unveiled this PR1 Bit, an AI-powered solution designed to help over 5 million UK SMEs integrate Bitcoin payments and manage crypto treasuries. Built on Coinbase Commerce, PR1 Bit offers a non-custodial multi-signature wallet, AI tools for market insights and reporting, and subscription tiers with enhanced features for listed companies. Integrates with Pri0r1ty's advisor agent, enabling real-time conversion, fiat calculations, and seamless crypto transactions. So that product is formally due to be launched next week and is already in talks with potential adopters. So what do we make on the OTC QB listing? Do we think that's obviously going to give a bit of exposure to US investors?
Yeah, well, I think the thing for the OTC listing is either the liquidity comes in straight away, or it's good to have because it'll come in the future. Like when Guardian did its OTC listing, there were virtually no trades, and then now it's got a sizable amount of trading on the US side, right? When the Bitcoin treasury companies, the ones that already had an OTC listing, did really, really well out of it because they were already prepared for the US liquidity to come in. So I think when we talk about, the OTC listings for PR1 or like any other company, there's two things you're doing. The first is you're trying to get increased liquidity from the US side, but you're also preparing for when that liquidity comes so that it's already there. In much the same way as if you want to go on holiday in 3 months and you don't have a current passport, you get the passport, right? And then when you want to go on holiday, you can go. It's as simple as that. It's not so much about providing liquidity today as having the system set up so that when Americans want to invest in the story, they can easily with no stress and not have to contact you and go, how do I invest in you? You can just say, here's the ticket, off you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good move for sure. And I actually think the move that came out on Friday has gone a bit under the radar, because if you start putting all of the customers available on the network that they can now trade in BTC, and you're taking a clip every time it happens, then that's going to be quite a way of collecting Bitcoin as well. So I think the market's probably missed that.
I guess we'll see. I mean, I imagine there's more RNSs come out in the near future, so we will keep an eye out for those. And when they come, we will review.
Yeah. And then we had Tiger Royalties. They announced that they'd acquired the second Bitensa network. And obviously we caught up with Jonathan Bixby earlier in the week. And let's have a listen to what he had to say. First off, for those unfamiliar, just take us through again exactly what this Bitensa subnet is and how does it relate to the broader Bitensa network?
Yeah, no problem. So broad, let's go broad into specific. So BitTensor obviously is decentralized AI. It has its own reward token, which is called Tau. Tau is built off the back of the concept of BTC, i.e. there's only 21 million Tau. It is mined like BTC. So every X period of time, it gets harder to mine. Less Tau obviously is a deflationary, which is great for holders of Tau who believe in decentralized AI. So the reason people do it and go to BitTensor is they don't want control on their AI. They don't want ChatGPT or Claude controlling what they're doing. And BitTensor is this beautiful network that allows you to do work in AI and get compensated in something called an alpha token, which is then only tradable for a Tau token. So if you think about it from an investor's perspective, does decentralized AI make sense? Yes or no? Does BitTensor offering an incentive mechanism on crypto make sense? Yes or no? Obviously, I'm a firm yes on both of those answers. And then the third one is, does the Tau token go up over time? And I think given the way that they've structured their project, the people behind the project, and what we're seeing in terms of the Tau valuations, I think the answer on that is yes as well. So that's what we're doing. The beta BitTensor network that we're putting out on Tiger is going to be active on Monday. And on Monday, we will announce what it's actually doing, which is exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been trying to sort of break it down into a kind of like a bit of, I think I had an analogy last time, which is these class streams and these subnets. But I was thinking like if we say Kev builds a chatbot, never going to happen, but imagine Kev builds this great chatbot, okay? And he wants to
monetize. Is he a chatbot? I think he is a chatbot.
I am a chatbot. I don't need to build one. What are you talking about?
So he builds this great chatbot, right? And he wants to monetize it. So he then comes to the Tiger Alpha subnet, which is obviously focused presumably on the language AI. And then he presumably has to stake some alpha tokens to get listed and connect his model onto that Tiger Alpha subnet. So his model works, and presumably he answers tasks that anybody puts through to him on the network, and then he gets paid in Tau if he obviously ranks well, and then Tiger also earns Tau too for operating that subnet. Is that a fair kind of like basic analogy?
It is, with one caveat, and the caveat is that the subnet itself is doing something. So Kevin would go to a Tau-based chatbot subnet if he wanted to do that. So the Tiger Alpha subnet we are doing something very unique and interesting.
So there's the next question. I think you've moved up the rankings pretty fast in the last few days even. How quickly do you think that this could become a top 10 subnet, the one that already is in existence, the Alpha?
Yeah, I was on this show last week saying I think we could be $1 billion company, and I'm a pound company, and I'm going to maintain that. I think that the way that this works is so clearly mathematical to me. And an analogy that I really like on this, and it's not a perfect analogy, but it's a good one, which is it's monopoly. I own Park Place, and when you land on Park Place and use my property, you are going to pay a tax.
Park Lane, man. Park Lane, not Park Place.
We call it Park Place in the US.
You see.
That's wrong, I think.
In England, it's Lane.
Okay, Park Lane.
You probably have it blue and not purple.
I think you used the Manhattan analogy in your RNS.
I did back in the day, but the way to think about this is I own prime real estate in the fastest growing market the world's ever seen, AI decentralized. I have a use case, and now, Phil, coming full circle to your question, my use case is very specific. Those people who want to use my use case will come to my subnet, are coming to the subnet and using it. That creates more emissions. Those emissions get sent out to the miners, the validators, and the owners. And the more people that use it, the more traction we have, the more we make. And you're seeing that in real time.
What is the other one likely to do then? Or you're not going to tell us that either?
He's not.
I have to drop that in an RNS because it's relevant and probably price sensitive.
I guess my question is obviously the second subnet, $25,000 acquisition. See, initially I read this and I thought, how has he managed to get this so cheaply? But I guess buying the actual subnet isn't the difficult part. It's creating a use case which is unique and valuable enough to generate the revenue, right? So, obviously you've got to invest in the infrastructure and the talent. The second subnet may not start profitable, but you're talking about it being made fair. I don't know if a better analogy, but a similar to me is kind of like buying web domains back in 1995. Because right now they're extremely valuable, right? Trying to get any domain at all. But back in the day, obviously, when the internet started, it didn't really matter. So is it similar to that or not at all?
Yeah, I think the web domains is a good analogy, except the caveat is there's only one web domain available a day forever. So I think it's even more valuable. And then to just point at your first question or comment, which is we bought for 25,000 yesterday.
Yeah.
If you check at what the subnets were bought for today, it's a lot more. So we bought the dip. I saw the dip the night before. We put in a pretty aggressive bid, and got to be good to be lucky, etc. But that was a very good price.
Is it luck, or is it just the potentially access and relationships within Bezant's ecosystem? Obviously, you've got.
I think luck is a combination of all those things.
Oh, okay, fair enough. I guess is it at auction then when you're buying these subnets?
Full auction at a certain time at night in the UK. It's between 3 and 5 a.m. Every night this thing goes up for auction. You've got to understand the nuances of it to be able to get them.
And then, okay, last question from me, and then I'll let you go back to Phil. Is the idea to just maintain these subnets forever, and they're just part of the business forever and ever and ever? Or is everything to sell, and at some point you want to sell off the initial ones and keep the next ones that you go developing?
Like a good real estate developer or business person, I would say, obviously the goal, if they're printing money the way they are, is to maintain them because the ROI on them is exceptional. You don't have to be a mathematician to figure that out. If Tau 10x's, these things will become incredibly valuable, and investors will be willing to pay for that Park Lane real estate.
Very good, very good.
So, Jonathan, Park Lane and Mayfair are the two names you want to look for. But how many subnets are you going to buy?
With the economics that we see today, Kevin, I don't see a limit.
Okay, so if we're talking in 6 months' time, we're not going to have two subnets. Is that fair to say?
Given the economics that I'm seeing today, the answer is a firm yes. Obviously, things change. I think they're going to change better, but we will reevaluate if it's worse. If it's better than what it is, I have yet to see a business where the acquisition costs of a product or of the core capital expenditures 25 to 100,000, and you can start earning 4,000 to 5,000 a day in essentially pure profit on emissions off that. That's a great business.
Yeah, and that's with Teo currently at. It did dip to 305 or 308.
And it's 360 last time I checked. So it's
360 now. But so people understand, this is exactly the same copycat as Bitcoin, 21 in circulation. They will halve every 4 years in terms of the amount of Bitcoins that are coming out, or Teo in this case. So as it stands at the minute, you got $300 and something in 3 to 5 years time. If we follow the same trend as Bitcoin, then these should be worth 3,000 to 5,000. per Teo coin, if that would be the same. Now, that isn't going to be a straight line for sure. That is basically the concept that you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm a long-term belief-driven, thesis-driven investor. And so I believe in AI, hard not to. I believe that crypto and decentralization are going to play a huge role in the agentic agent world. Not hard to believe that thesis. And I think Tao's the winner. So I'm coming out saying today, you heard about it here first, Tao is going to win in the decentralized crypto space. There are 30 odd or 3 billion, but 30 on the list of top cryptos. I see that going into the top 10 in this cycle. Like I am bullish.
So what is the other situations that you have within Tiger Royalties then that one are associated with Tao, and two that are in the BTC arena in terms of the having a treasury? I mean, do you see there's much point in you having a BTC treasury when you're printing Teos like they're going out of fashion?
Yeah, in some ways we have a Tao treasury, right? So if you think about we're earning in Tao, there's a Tao treasury. Coming back to your point, we are sort of across a number of areas, right? So AROC, agentic AI, AROC does make sense to be on a subnet, right? Because it is an agent. It could be on a subnet. It's proving its worth. That's why we put another 250,000 into it. Standard Strategies, Standard we invested in about a week ago. I think if you look at their stock, it's up significantly since then. I don't have the latest print as we sit here today. So I think that's a great strategy. And the great strategy there is, I don't know who's going to win. Is it Metaplanet? Is it Smarter Web? Is it Tao? Is it Strategy out of the US? I want a basket of them. And so I think it's some of the best ideas are simple. That group who I've known for a while came to me with that idea. I loved it. We went there. The Tao Strategies investment out of Singapore is just more into this ecosystem, especially in the Asia market, that is taking off. And so that made a lot of sense. And then obviously our Tau Alpha token has done incredibly well. Therefore, Tau Beta makes a lot of sense and potentially more. That's correct.
Just to give you an idea, Phil, before, so Standard Strategy is 0.09, up 54% today. So it's doing okay. What price did you buy in?
I don't know if we made that public, but the number of shares we have is public. So let me just be, you can double check that, but significantly less. You can do the math, but I don't know if we made the share.
So for sure, it's probably worth in excess of $1 million now, whereas you invested 250,000. I think
it's going to turn out to be a great investment.
Yeah.
Okay. I've got a few questions that were been fielded from some investors. So, and a few of them we have kind of touched on, but will Tiger be holding the Tau it earns as a long-term treasury asset, or do you plan to recycle those rewards into other investments, operations, or new subnet builds?
Some of the above. So it depends on price, depends on where we think it's going. So we're very focused on being lean and nimble there. So I wouldn't want to go and say something categorical, but when it makes sense to hold, you hold. When it makes sense not to, you don't.
Yeah. And then obviously, when will we start to hear more about Tiger Alpha's performance, things like model rankings, emissions per day, or activity metrics? I mean, we've had one guy on the group, Dave, who's been putting on every sort of 30 seconds as the emissions have gone up at the weekend. It started off around the 8 and it almost doubled to 16 over the weekend. And everybody was saying, wow, they've almost doubled their emissions in 48 hours. So yeah, tell us more about the kind of performance analytics.
Yeah, so we are obviously AIM listed, so we have to be very careful about what we publish. Obviously, the beautiful thing about crypto and Tau is it's public. So anyone can go to the Tau website and see our subnets emissions in real time. And so we're not hiding that. We're not going to probably be talking about it on a daily basis because that's not what we are as a public company. But you can see our performance because it's right there in front of your face. Yeah, which I love. I love it. I love that part.
No, it's fantastic. And also, we talked a little bit about the slots or the subnets and the auction process, but are you seeing signs of increasing demand or competition for these subnet slots?
Absolutely. You need to know what you're doing to buy them. There's an art to it to secure them. And again, I'm so excited about what we did last night at 25K. That is amazing.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I guess the last question is, you've done the Fifth Avenue Manhattan analogy. When are you going to get your Macy's?
You will see. We're going to hopefully put out an RNS about what our subnets are doing. It's coming. Yeah.
I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued to know what the subnets are doing, because obviously, depending on exactly what they are doing, you have grown annual revenue. I mean, it's a big calculation and an immense number of variables. But they've been doing it in the group, saying you've now hit $2 million a year on the Alpha one. If it just carries on as it is, no increases at all, just stand still in terms of that, both the tau and the emissions, but so many variables. But when we get to know what it's all about, I think hopefully from looking at your face, we'll get excited about the fact it's in this particular thing, because I imagine you're going to have chosen something that is going to grow pretty significantly.
Yeah, I think it's going to make sense to the market.
Very good.
Okay, what else would you like to tell people about Tiger Royalties? Because you've got so many things going on there that I think people need to know the full story.
Yeah, I think the full story is AI meets crypto. I mean, I think that I like quick, easy vision, and the vision is anything where AI and crypto are going to intersect makes a lot of sense. And then the second thing, and this is obvious to the UK investor, less obvious today because some of these stocks have gone down, but the treasury strategy idea just makes a lot of sense. And so I think we're going to see more and more adoption of smart corporate treasury strategies across multiple coins. And I think that's a very interesting place to be getting good deal flow. And obviously being connected into the deal flow that I am, like I'm seeing these companies come along and they're seemingly all raising premium, and they're raising for premium because people want access to this market. And so in the UK, it's hard to buy and hold crypto, as everyone knows. And so proxies make a lot of sense for people. And I think that's why you're seeing people move into the treasury strategy companies, and anything related to Bitcoin and crypto is exciting for investors that want something a little bit higher performing than a 60-40 portfolio. And I think that's where people are going.
Yeah. I mean, I guess for me, I mean, my last question is, if you're making, what was it, 4,800 a day, 365 days a year, so 1.75 million and change in a year, plus whatever else is going on in the background, that's a lot of extra capital, right? And I guess it's kind of, what else are you looking at investing in? I mean, it could be, you know, another decentralized computer infrastructure, so you know, the Akash network or Render. It could be, you know, something else like hydrogen fuel cells, which might be quite exciting given the money that's going into there. And there's actually quite a lot of cross-validation across what you're doing there. Data ownership, you know, or even a black swan hedge. So what are you kind of doing in the background? I see you're smiling. It's not.
Those are all great ideas. I mean, I don't want to be vague, but the reality is anything you can do in AI will be done on a Tau subnet, and it will be done at scale. Because why would I rely on the big guys who have closed wall gardens and really expensive tokens? Like the reality is, I don't want that control. I want to control my own destiny. And creating a subnet is creating a business in decentralized AI. So Charles, to your point, all of those ideas are great. And because, and actually we'll go back full circle to the idea of the early internet, every website did well, right? Because there were no websites. Like, It's not genius. This is greenfield. This is what's called greenfield technology opportunity. And so every single one of these ideas will be done on Tau at scale, and everyone doing them is going to make a lot of money. So this is early days. That's where we're at. That's why it's so exciting for me.
Good. Thank you.
20 years from now, and Tau is $100,000, the same as BTC is today. Your company could be worth quite a few pounds.
Yes, it could.
So what do we all make of Tiger Royalties and the whole kind of, obviously we talked about the AROC thing, the AROC VC and the whole meme coin trading bot. And then obviously now with the fact that the second Bezant network is potentially going to be coming online on Monday, and an announcement regarding that in terms of, you know, what sort of subnet it's in. But what do we think about the fact that there was an announcement that we saw on X related to the fact that they're halting the number of subnets? Remember, it was one subnet each day. I think it's capped around 128.
128. Yeah. Well, I think, speaking to Jonathan, one of the key things for me is that acquiring a subnet is not enough. You need to have a use case for it that makes it valuable, right? Yeah. So we don't know what the use case is for the alpha subnet yet. The second we find out, you might find that the demand for these subnets goes really, really high. So when he says, "Oh, this is what the use case is and why it's making, you know, why the revenue of it is going up so quickly," then loads of people are going to want a subnet.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Is it a bit of a double-edged sword? Because you're damned, you know what I mean? Like,
damned if you do, damned if you don't.
If you announce it, you almost you're giving away the game, are you?
You're giving away IP. I mean, this is, but that's part of being a public company. At some point, you have to say it. And if you're private, you don't have to say anything. I've got private companies where I don't even have a clue what the fuck they're doing. And they just say, come back to us in 3 years. And like, generally, they've lost money by that point. But, you know, the point is that previously it was a problem. Now it's excellent, because if you're limited to 128 for now, right? Then loads of people want to come in and get a subnet. and there's a limited number of subnets, suddenly saying what we're doing is you're limiting your ability to acquire more subnets at a low value, but your current subnets become significantly more valuable because of the limited supply.
If people are there, they're chomping at the bit. They've got something they want to put onto one of these subnets with a specific use case, but they can't, or they want to enter into a new specific use case.
Yeah. Well, I'm writing an article on Tiger at the moment, and like it's really complex stuff. A lot of this stuff. I'm trying to put it in words that the average investor will be able to understand. But I think the big thing for me is that the second he tells you what they're doing with that alpha subnet, then this thing is going to explode. And I think one of the big things is that sort of John Bixby is he's clearly confident that this particular set of programming is going to be, a global phenomenon. That's what it sounds like. And I want to ask him why, right? And clearly the answer to why is what he's doing with the alpha subnet, which he hasn't told us yet, and he's not going to. So when it comes out, then I think you might find a significant re-rate in the share price as well.
Yeah. The other thing, if you dig deeper, and maybe you've done this already in your article, Charles, was that it also came out that the developers now, there are only going to be 256, and which is obviously double the subnet on the 128, but a competitive tender. So the ones at the bottom will start to drop out if they're not doing a good job. So the whole thing will become more and more and more competitive to drive more and more and more traffic through these subnets, which is going to create more and more emissions and more revenue in terms of the TAU that is going to be paid. So I think it's sort of exponential growth that, if it becomes like the second Bitcoin, like we just said, only for developers, I mean, the opportunity is just essentially mind-boggling, to be honest.
I think one of the key things for me, we were talking just now with Hewie about Bitcoin volatility, or and just cryptocurrency volatility in general. This is a different cryptocurrency, but if you're generating $2 million a year from one subnet, if there's even if that profitability dips, you're still generating enough capital to pay all your working capital costs, your G&A, your issues. So if there is a winter for 12 months, 18 months, there's no problem for them compared to other companies that are relying on cryptocurrency staying up permanently. So that's another big strength there.
Yeah, that comes down to the whole discussion as well, is that the least risky option to me looks like you have a solid business that has revenues and has sort of EBITDA underneath a BTC treasury.
Yeah,
and
100%.
You sort of get the best of both worlds.
Well, it's exactly.
I see PR1 as that.
You do, but you don't get what they call the fit fit rating that we talked about earlier. You don't get the NNAV, so you don't get as much volatility and let's say leverage against it because it's not a pure bit. It's all about the pure treasuries.
I will fight you on that, because the only reason why is Michael Saylor, my mighty figure in the world. I don't want to talk about him as an individual, but MicroStrategy, $100 billion market cap. But they have an underlying business that generates $500 million of revenue a year currently.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, Charles, is that they've only moved 8,000% in the last, say, I think it's year, which is still incredible.
Only?
No. SWC has done 11,000 in the last month or two.
But it's
all about the NNAV leverage.
But I think, for me anyway, I think that what will kill a Bitcoin treasury company is selling a Bitcoin. Any Bitcoin you sell, and then that's it. You get written off forever, pretty much. So you need to have a way, because Bitcoin fell 70% in 2022, right? So, and these are, in many cases, often they're leveraged plays. So you need to have a way to make sure you can cover all of your expenses while retaining all your Bitcoin should it go down and up, because everyone agrees it's going to be volatile on the way up further. So I guess we'll see.
Okay. We also saw an RNS from SBAR in the week, which operates an AI agent marketplace, adopting a Bitcoin treasury management policy effective 23rd of June, reflecting its belief in digital assets as a store of value and inflation hedge. CEO Jill Kenny stated the move aligns with the company's financial innovation goals while maintaining governance standards and supporting capital preservation as it scales the SBAR.ai platform. The policy is designed to complement, not alter, its core AI marketplace operations and does not classify the company as an investment firm. We caught up with Jill in the week, and this is what she had to say.
So what SBAR is, it's a marketplace for AI agents. So essentially what you do in any marketplace, you have your sellers and your buyers. And for us, the sellers on the marketplace are developers of AI agents. And for those that don't know, AI agents are software models or AI models that are stacked on top of each other that can autonomously execute a task end to end. And these are advancing very quickly in a really exciting way. And you're seeing more businesses, enterprises, and individuals actually integrating them into their day-to-day work, into their workflows. So it could be a sales intelligence agent, it could be an HR agent, it could be a marketing agent. Like if you all wanted to get like a marketing refresh and rebrand and then wanted to create ads, you could have an agent that did that for you on one platform. It could build it in Figma. It could then take that asset, put it across multiple platforms. It could put paid behind it and then give you reports back and email out anyone who needed to know. So what businesses are realizing is, hey, we need to do this because it saves us time. It'll improve our ROI and our productivity. And if we don't, our competitors are doing it. So we're seeing fast adoption of that, but we're also seeing the space is a little bit fragmented. These agents are being developed at rapid pace and at scale, and they're getting really, really smart. A voice agent got released today by a company actually out of the UK called 11 Labs. But businesses are like, where do I discover this? Where do I go to find the right agent for my business? So we want to be that conduit. So we will host the agents that you can search and then test in our environment and deploy as you wish. So that's essentially what it is. We're a two-sided marketplace.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess the next question for listeners, certainly for me, is how do you monetize this? Like, how does SBAR get any, revenues coming in from this whole kind of marketplace? Almost like an app store for AI agents, if you will.
Yeah. No, it is like that. It's very similar. So we have 3 different revenue streams. So as an AI agent developer, there'll be monthly fees in order to host your agent on that platform. And very common within this model, task-based. So how much you need to use, that's what you pay per month. And whether that's to build your agent, we're putting in those capabilities to host your agent, to market your agent, and then monetize it. So think of it as like the AI agent developer has their own little shop, and you can make that shop as big and beautiful and robust as you want. You pay us a lovely fee to do that per month. And then on the sales side, a % of sales. So Phil, if you created that amazing marketing agent, you're selling it to Kevin. SBAR takes a cut, which is also, not a groundbreaking new method. You look at Shopify, you look at Amazon, you look at all those marketplaces. And then the third one is just advertising within platform. So how everyone will want their agent up front and center, because, the pace that these agents are getting developed, there'll be millions by end of year. There'll be a lot of marketing agents. How do you get your agent to be top of search? We're actually going to launch next week our own AI agent that'll help you navigate the site. So if you were looking for that HR agent, it'll make those suggestions. So those 3 business models, and what we like about them is they reward the developer at the same time through the process. So the more great agents on the platform, the more monthly we have, but the more sales they have and the more we take. So it's this really nice flywheel generating revenue.
Absolutely.
And then just playing in the AI space.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I guess we've already talked in the past with other companies around this TAO and almost a similar sort of thing. AI agents are rewarded based on like performance metrics. They call it the emissions, as I believe, is all down to that and rewarding the TAO. But how I mean, I guess the question I've got is, how are things going since you've kind of launched that in the whole of the marketplace? And are you seeing an increase in the number of the monetization on a monthly basis?
Yeah, so we actually just went live on June 3rd with our very early beta version, which you'll see if you go on there. Right now, it's more of an AI agent directory. The monetization features are all scheduled to be slated in up and going Q3, and there are new agents being uploaded to the platform daily. So we know there is a need to have these agents here. As a company, we were in a fortunate position where we acquired a company called Aura Technologies PLC, and they had a ready-made marketplace already built. KYC, AML payments in. So right now we're in the stage of migrating the tech and then building our own tech stack on top of that. So we are still early days, but obviously we have milestones in our roadmap with the tech of what will be integrated, and that wallet for the payments, you'll see in Q3.
Let's look at some resource sector stuff. So Bezant Resources, they announced the formal award of mining license ML246 for the Hope and Gorob mining project in Namibia, valid until 31st of March 2040. License granted to Hope and Gorob mining follows the recent environmental clearance certificate. Executive Chairman Colin Bird noted that implementation work streams have already commenced in preparation for mine development, with further updates on project frameworks and timelines to follow. Yeah, and obviously we did a sort of short podcast. It's never short with Colin because he loves to talk. But it was a great chat with him in the week. We had about 20 minutes with him. And how did you feel that things were going for Hope and Gorob? And I mean, how significant is this license, Charles?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. They're basically, I mean, in my mind, you've got to finance it, build it, and then profit. It's as simple as that. I mean, we kind of make things overcomplicated around here, but they're Blackstone Minerals holdings, assuming this all goes through, and it's looking like it will very shortly, that'll be roughly $8 million. Whether they can sell that off to an institutional investor or whether they want to keep it, I don't know. But I mean, we're talking the capex on this thing was between 10 and 20 million, right? So that's mostly self-finance and a little bit of, a loan note, for example, or any kind of creative way to get a few $1 million for the additional capex. And then you get the finance through, you build it, which, as we spoke with Colin, it's crush, it's blast, crush, or a bit of ore sorting.
Yeah.
It's not exactly complex. And then, I mean, I did the calculations, and he wouldn't comment on them because obviously, he doesn't comment on them directly. But plug in the current gold and copper prices, you're looking at $50 million a year of free cash flow, and that can start next year. What's the market cap? Like 2 potatoes and a carrot?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's the upside there is ridiculous. I mean, we've said that with the Blackstone element of things, it's actually put a negative valuation on the Hope and Gorob project.
Yeah,
but did you see the news that I think they announced, didn't they, Friday morning, that they'd actually completed the merger with IDM through that, obviously, which
so they just need to get hold of the shares, and that's that. Yeah. But
it's basically a shot to nothing at this moment in time, surely. And the reality is that I think the funding can come in many forms. I think more likely it's going to be some sort of percentage deal that is given to someone who wants to put some cash in, or alternatively an offtake that wants to put some cash in, and then they're going to have the cash on the go.
Yeah, I think it's basically it's a question of, they've done all the metallurgical studies. They had Steiner out there. Anyone listening should know who Steiner are doing your sort of work. I think it's a question of, when you're building mine, even a simple mine, things can go wrong, obviously, but the risk reward is so asymmetric based on the fact they're planning to produce next year. It's no
there's not much mining risk because basically you need a digger and a truck.
Yeah, it's all that stuff. Yeah.
It really is not complicated.
Famous last words, though, Kev.
No, I accept there's always risk in these things for sure. But if you've got the shares covered or the price of the market cap covered by another share in Australia, then what are you actually risking at that point?
Yeah.
And then obviously we had African Pioneer as well, keeping in Namibia. They really received the unconditional mining license ML240, valid until 23rd of March 2045. That's a 20-year mining license for the 85% owned Gombo copper gold project in Namibia, and obviously completing all required government permitting following the March 2025 ECC award. Major milestone for the company and enabling a shift from permitting to project execution, with plans for low-cost open pit mining as a starter operation and fast-track path to production. So I guess the question I've got is, do these two projects tie together in some way?
Yeah, I think Colin, wants to keep them broadly separate. I mean, the fact they're both in Namibia, which is a great jurisdiction comparatively in Africa, is good news, obviously. But I think the distinction between the two is African Pioneer has an even smaller market cap, but that's because it doesn't have collateral, as in Blackstone Minerals shares. So really, what you want to see with African Pioneer, and obviously Colin has got great connections. Sanderson Capital Partners are wonderful, but basically what you want to see is you want to see the financing of this mine. I think maybe a little bit harder but unless he's got something in the pipeline, but obviously he wouldn't be able to tell us. Simply because with Bezant you do have that $8 million shareholding. It just makes life a lot easier. When you're going to a lender and you say, look at my balance sheet, it's just simpler, isn't it? Yeah. So I guess we'll see.
It is, but African Pioneer also has the Botswana licenses and also the licenses within Zambia. I think it's a ludicrous valuation right now. It's less than £2 million for.
I agree.
For what's there. I think you could probably sell that license for at least 5 times what the current market cap is, and then just walk away, which is not what we want him to do. But if you put a valuation on something like that I think is realistic. It's not over the top in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, well, I think both companies are really undervalued, and I have, as I'm sure. Well, I'm not sure. I don't know actually, but I'm sure you guys will have shares in these ones as well.
Yeah, happy to admit we own them both.
Yeah, 100%. And it's funny because when we have this conversation, occasionally you go, you promote your own shares. It's like, yeah, but the thing is, as much as we might talk about them, if the share price doesn't go up, then we just end up losing money anyway. And companies like Bezant or African Pioneer, once you get to a certain shareholding, you can't sell the stock anyway because the liquidity is not there. Yeah. So if it goes into production, either or both of these in 12 months' time, there'll be huge liquidity, huge profitability, and then everyone wins. And that's, fingers crossed, where we're going to go.
Okay, so Charles, anything on your radar this week you want to talk about? Just give us some, highlights you've seen.
Well, copper is going to the moon. I think is obviously tied into what we were just saying, but I mean, we're trying to. I'm trying to think of the words. The other Asia Met, obviously, which I've spoken about before, and they're going through like the financing rigmarole, kind of like I imagine Bezant is doing an African Pioneer. Yeah. But the other one is that I'm starting to look at Phoenix Copper. You guys know? No. Again, tiny market cap, but kind of get a bond through, which could be massively transformative. And they've had troubles with it before, but now with copper where it is. And starting to rise, I think a lot of these projects are going to find it a lot easier to get financing. Obviously, the world has kind of kept their eyes on crypto treasury companies. But the other thing I think I kind of want to touch on is Greatland Gold, and its share price is kind of all over the shop since it's since the listing on the ASX. And basically, my perception of this, and I said it before it happened, and will continue to say it, when large stock lists down under, then there's an arbitrage opportunity where basically you buy and sell the share at different share prices to profit from the difference. And market makers don't want you to do that because it creates massive volatility. So what they're doing at the moment, and it might not feel fair, but this is my view anyway, is they're dropping the share price or raising the share price in ways that you can't tell for the next couple of weeks until you get price discovery down under. So basically, just wouldn't worry about whether it's going up 8-9% or down 8-9% on a day-to-day basis. It's kind of irrelevant. Just wait a couple of weeks and it should settle down.
Okay. I noticed platinum's had a rebounded a little bit, but I think year to date it's up 40%. So that seems to be quite in favour at the moment. But other than that, anything else you're looking forward to next week?
Next week? Well, it's July, so hopefully get some sunshine back. But there's not.
Weekends, like Monday is going to be 34, 35, and I've got to go to the city on Monday, so I don't know if I'm looking forward to that because that's like next level humidity, isn't it?
I think you're getting a cough, Phil. I can hear you coughing down the microphone. You're a bit of a fever there. I wouldn't.
But I really want to go though.
No, he looks fine, guys. He's better now. It's fine.
Good. But we got Wimbledon starting Monday, so that's always one. We've had Glastonbury Festival on this weekend, and we've got Rod Stewart, would you believe, performing on the Sunday Legend slot, where he's been saying it's actually costing him money to play because he's got to fly all of his band from the US in, and he was sort of like, it's costing me £100,000 to do this, but it's worth it because it's Glastonbury and all that lot. So That one's going to be interesting. We've got the Formula One Austrian Grand Prix. Obviously, that's going to be on TV, but should be a good one. Qualifying on Saturday, obviously race on Sunday. Interesting to see whether McLaren are still going to dominate. Oliver Piastri and obviously Lando Norris battling out. And then, other than that, has anyone watched anything, listened to any good podcast, any recommendations this week?
No, sure. We've been in Germany, and I'm about to board or get my boarding pass in Frankfurt Airport to fly home and lie down after bumping my head. Yeah, that was a story. Last Saturday, went to feed the puppies, lifted my head and cut my head open. 3 stitches.
In the puppies, mate. I think we said, is that a euphemism for something? Okay, well, yeah, I did notice you were a little bit jaded in Germany, Kevin. I didn't, I was a little bit concerned, but I think you're feeling a bit better today. I think you just get yourself checked out when you get back, mate.
It's just dazed by the amount of copper out there. You look, oh my goodness.
Next week we'll get Charles to interview Phil and myself, and we'll give you an update on the Green X visit that we did.
Yeah.
And next week we'll also review the stocks for the first half of the year. And heads up to both of you.
We've got the finale, Kev, season finale. And
heads up to both of you. You're both going to be able to add one more stock to see what you want for the next 6 months.
Okay. I've got one recommendation, and this is you'll enjoy this one. This is a podcast, but it's a drama podcast, done with all sound effects. It's almost like a
audio
documentary or an audio book. But it's called Central Intelligence, and it was originally done for BBC Radio 4, and it's got Kim Cattrall on it and Ed Harris, and it basically spans 10 years, 10 episodes, and it traces the history of the CIA from its inception, sort of post-Second World War, through to 9/11, and all through the eyes of this one of the original CIA officers, Eloise Page, who's portrayed by Kim Cattrall. And it is fascinating, some of the things that happen in the background, and you just immerse yourself in the sound of all the sound effects of going through to walking, with Nazis, with the Russians, with Stalin and everything. It's a real, Kev, you'd love it because you're into the whole history thing. So look it up, Central Intelligence. It's a BBC Radio 4 production. You can find it on the usual Spotify, Apple Podcasts and all that lot. So big recommendation on that one. And I finished off Gold as well this week, which is the BBC series with series 2 regarding the Brinks Mat gold robbery and how they kind of like embezzled the money and smelted the gold down. So a great one. But thanks for listening all, and obviously have a great weekend. If you do like what you've heard, please do subscribe, hit the bell icon for any further notifications of future episodes, and have a great weekend. Enjoy the weather.
Enjoy.
This podcast was brought to you by Roast PR Limited. If you would like to appear on a future episode of The Sunday Roast, please email admin@thesundayroast.net.